This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute. You're hearing my voice right now mixed through iZotope, Ozone, and Velvet on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Make sure to get my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com, and please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. And please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel because it's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock. What advice do you feel like you'd like to go back and give yourself?
Not to drink my own Kool-Aid. Don't forget how important you are in other people's lives and how unimportant your career is for other people's lives. And it's not even about engineering. It's just about you're going to be a much happier person if the people around you are happy with you. I spent a decent portion of my career when I owned the studio just as a workaholic. And it accumulated into me selling my studio and making a lot of horrendous mistakes in my life that I remember to this day and go, oh, that Homer Simpson feel.
Right.
And it was really just drinking my own Kool-Aid, you know, just like really being too hyper-focused on climbing the ladder.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Brendan Duffey, an award-winning mix and mastering engineer with 21 nominations to his name. Based in Jupiter, Florida, Brendan has nearly 3 decades of experience delivering world-class sound for artists across different genres, including Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, Kendrick Lamar, Milton Nascimento, and Sheryl Crow, to name just a few. For 10 years, Brendan owned and operated a major recording facility in Sao Paulo, Brazil, before relocating to California to focus on mixing and mastering. Later, he moved to Jupiter, Florida, where he lives and works with his family. Brendan holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Recording Arts from CSU Chico and a master's degree in music business from Berklee College of Music. Big thank you and a shout out to our mutual friend Matt Boudreau for our introduction at our annual NAMM meetup back in California. Please welcome Brendan Duffey to Recording Studio Rockstars. Brendan, my friend, are you ready to rock, dude?
Yes, I believe I'm ready to rock.
Welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you here, and it was awesome to meet you briefly when we were in California.
Yeah, you sat down with me and I believe 2 of my old students from when I taught college.
Oh, that's so cool, man. So that's part of your background is a lot of teaching. You've really gotten into the teaching stuff, haven't you?
I did. When my wife and I sold the recording facility that we owned for, like you said, a decade in Brazil, I had a baby and almost a 3-year-old. And we decided it would be better for our lifestyles to move back to California, Davis, California, in a simpler life. And I basically quit the audio industry at that point and became a college professor at American River College and spent 6 or 7 years there teaching advanced audio courses, which was amazing. I actually credit it with making me a better audio engineer, and the success I have today, I believe it had a major role in, my teaching had a major role in making this all happen because it made me really understand what I was doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've found the same thing. I started this podcast and I've been doing it for 10 years and I thought I was going to be sharing all this knowledge that I had. And I discovered it eventually. I was like, I have learned so much just from doing this and just from, listening to other people and interacting with everybody.
Well, it's teaching is just, it's so many iterations of translating what audio is, and not everybody learns the same way. So you can never explain something in a singular way. It has to be
right.
It has to be delivered for multiple fashions of learning, and that's where you really, really learn how a preamp works or what a DI box does, because you have to explain it to 30 individuals, and not everybody will learn the same way. So you sort of have to have this Swiss Army knife of teaching methods in order to make sure that your students understand what they're working with. And I would have revelations in my mind in the classroom, just epiphanies about how to mix or master, just because I found some gold mine of how to explain a specific process. And then I think, oh my God, I wonder if I apply this at home. And as I did, the music production world started pulling me back in.
That's really cool, man. I've had a lot of interns in the studio too. That was probably my original introduction to the teaching aspect. And it's also just really rewarding working with people and just interacting. And it's just fun to, it's usually younger people, it's usually younger versions of ourselves that are in the schools learning this stuff. But it's a variety. I mean, I just had a conversation with a guy who's a few years younger than me, just went back to, having finished a career in something else to go back to school for recording. But it's just so much fun to watch and interact with people who are like at that exciting stage of learning all this stuff.
Well, it also has taught me to still be excited about things. I think, after I started this when I was 17, and there is sort of it's sort of like lackluster now. You win an award or an album gets big and you're sort of like, yay. And you move on to the next day. Whereas when I see my students do it, it's so much more exciting for them. I was at NAMM this last year and I ran into a bunch of students that were doing so well. And it made me really think like, wow, I don't care about this as much, the actual success of this. I really like doing this, but maybe I should get a little more excited about what I do. Because they definitely are. I think my students were more excited about my victories this year than I was. And it makes you rethink of like how cool what we do it really is. And how long I really worked to get here.
Do you remember, maybe take us back and give us a little bit of a brief story arc of yourself getting into all this and what you remember about being excited about recording and making music when you started? I know for myself, I could have recorded something that sounded pretty bad and still been like incredibly excited about it.
Oh,
back in the day,
It started, I remember the specific day. It was in the summer, and my friend had bought the Year in the Life of Metallica. And it was a VHS, we were watching it, and it was my introduction to Bob Rock. And I just saw what he did and all the buttons. It was Bob Rock and Randy Staub. And I just looked at it and went, that is the coolest thing ever. I want to do that. That year, my friend Nick and I bought a 4-track Tascam and started recording music. So that was back in...
And do you play an instrument?
I'm a classically trained pianist, and I played guitar. I still sort of play. Played guitar since I was 16, I think. And I played saxophone for about 15 years. So yeah, I played quite a few instruments, and now I just, tinkle on everything I can get my hands on, but not very well.
Yeah. And did you learn how to read and all that kind of stuff at that point?
Yes, I was playing in orchestras and jazz bands, and the only instrument I can't read music on is the guitar. And I just did everything by ear.
Yeah.
So, but everything else I, went and had lessons and did the whole music thing as a kid in school. and outside of it. So I played in Dixieland jazz bands as a kid and would drive all around the state of California, go play moose lodges, playing Glenn Miller tunes.
That's hilarious.
It was a lot of fun. You walk in as a kid, like 13, 14-year-old kid, and all the old people would look at you like, oh no, there's just a bunch of dumb kids. This is going to suck. And when we got those looks, we just open up with Glenn Miller's In the Mood. As soon as that happened, all the old fogies would hit the dance floor. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that period of time.
That's great, man. That's great. How many saxophones were in Glenn Miller? I think that was one of my epiphanies, was realizing that the part of the Glenn Miller sound was a bunch of saxophones, wasn't it?
Well, it's actually because the tenor sax and the trumpet are in the same key. I believe it's B flat, and his trumpet player didn't show up to a show or something, so the tenor sax player took over, and that sort of coined his sound, I believe. I could be wrong, but as my memory serves me, that's what really happened to Glenn Miller. That's what made his sound.
So what was your opening one? Was which track?
In
was
the
it?
Mood.
In the Mood, yeah. And which one is da na 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 na?
I won't remember the name.
Yeah, it's like the real. That's the one where I think of like the sax as just being this. You're like, what is that sound? That's so cool too. Well, that's great, man. I mean, I came up loving the sound of jazz too, and went into rock and roll. But I think it's fun to have an appreciation for all that variety of music going into what we do.
I mean, even as a kid, I grew up listening to playing classical music. So as a kid, I would listen to Berg, Schoenberg, and then I'd go off to the Beatles and then AC/DC. It's just always been a lot of different stuff. So I was always interested in tons of different music, but really recording is sort of what clicked in me, because I was never the best instrumentalist. I could never get to the level of any of my friends, but the recording studio was a little different in that. And I think I liked a lot of the technical aspects of the instruments and setting them up, and guitars and amps and microphones and which preamp and the compressor, and that was much more interesting to me than sitting there and learning, all the modes on the guitar. I just wasn't interested in that. But I could read for hours a manual on an SSL. That was much more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, back when we were in school, we had to do things like they'd give us the test would be a sheet of paper with a flow chart of the console and blank boxes, and you had to, like, from memory, fill out what was every single element of the console and the signal flow and stuff. It was fun. Do you find that the kids, or rather students, just in recording, are learning any of that stuff now, and that's useful? Or, I mean, that must have really changed while you were teaching too.
Where I went to school, Chico, and I was actually just back there last week. Teach.
And where is that? Where is that?
Chico is in California, Northern California. They've got a really great recording arts program that a lot of just major engineers have come out of, like Steve Boffman, who did all the Eminem and 50 Cent records. He's a good friend of mine, and tons of other people. But they still have the kids mix on an analog console. They have an SSL. Duality, I believe. They have an API, and they have a bunch of analog consoles, no tape machines, but they mix on a console. And at American River, where I taught, we used a 2-inch tape machine and an SSL, and they have to set everything up and understand signal flow and patch bay. We focused less on Pro Tools because there's so much information on Pro Tools, but there's less information on where recording came from. And just simple mic techniques and everything like that. So yeah, I think a lot of the schools are still focusing on that aspect of the analog world and traditional recording setups.
I think it helps. I mean, I know when an intern comes into the studio and, says, I'm certified, whatever number in Pro Tools, I'm like, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, good for you.
I know you don't know anything. Actually, I know that you will know a few button clicks that you'll teach me, which will be great, and I look forward to that. But beyond that, because interns would come in and they'd have learned some newer feature that I hadn't even messed with yet, and that was always fun.
But it's also a feature you possibly never use again. But
maybe.
Going back, it was funny to get the advanced students, and I would ask them, So who actually really knows how to use a compressor and what each control does? And the hands would sort of go like this and then fade away, because they knew if you said yes, I would ask you. And so what I do with the students is have them define things in the simplest of terms. So, for example, a compressor, the controls would be threshold is the on and off button. Ratio is the in versus out button. Attack is how fast on, and release is how fast off. And when the students went through the thought process behind understanding what each control did, and then defining it in words, that's when you really get, you could see the students sort of their eyes lighting up, because they finally understood what it did. Because before that, they would just read in a book, and the book definitions are very rigid. They were using the same recording studio techniques book that I did when I went to Sacramento City College and didn't understand what a compressor did from the book. So it's a lot of the thought process behind that. So my hope was to push students into the world that could walk into a recording studio and not possibly set it up, but at least have a foundational knowledge base to perform, and not just have certificates, which no one cares about.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that. I still struggle with manuals. I'll push myself through it, and I'll accept that I might have to read what it just said 5 times and then slower and slower each time to try and understand it. But there's something about having somebody who has used the thing show you, no, this is what with a snare, if you do this to it, you open up the attack on the compressor, now you have control over how much smack of the snare comes through. If you record a glockenspiel, turn that attack all the way as fast as it'll go, and you'll make the mallet disappear when it hits. The spike will go away, stuff like that.
But it's also finding out the things that the manual tells you shouldn't do that work.
Right. Totally.
All the stuff that's against the rules according to the manual, but turns into, techniques that are in plugins now. So,
yeah. In fact, they become, I'd go so far as to say very often they become the sounds that everybody loves so much that, you scratch your head and think, how did they ever get that sound? I mean, one of the aspects of that for me, I think, has been learning to just really push the shit out of stuff, just push it, make it louder, because there's I think I think everybody goes through the try and turn everybody up. Everybody in the band wants to hear more of themselves, and then you make a mess of your music, and then you don't know what to do next. And then you learn to be too careful, and you're like, oh, you can't just turn things up. That doesn't work. You have to learn how to make more space for things. And then probably you come back to learning, what, you just need to just push that, just make it louder. It'll sound better.
Well, I did 2 workshops, mix workshops, one at Chico State and one at this other place called Butte College, both in California, Northern California. And I told the students that I have my secret setting, which is, its definition is blow shit up. And so they'd see me using, if you really want to hear what a compressor sounds like, don't just poke at it. Just ignite it. Pour lighter fluid on it. And so I mixed an entire track for them with just SSL EQs and I think 2 different types of compressors. I think a FET and like
an 1176 or something?
I used a V-Comp or something. I can't remember. They weren't my plugins. I just went, okay, let's try this one. Right. I can mix anywhere. This is the type of plugin. Let's see what it sounds like. And I went through a couple different plugins till I got what I wanted, and I explained why I wanted it. And then you see the students start to understand. And then, of course, the teacher goes, oh, for the next couple weeks, I'm going to get overcompressed mixes. But that's how you learn how things sound, is just really pushing them to their limit. And I don't see a lot of that on YouTube. I don't spend much time on YouTube, but last night I went and investigated some mix techniques, and it was a guy who I've never heard about whose records I can't find, teaching people how to mix, and it was everything I wouldn't do. It was careful and controlled. I went, you know, I grew up watching Sylvia Massey and Rich Veltrop and other mix, and they would just blow shit up and then sort of push it back and then carry it in. This is not what this guy is doing. I'm going to trust the people who have made some legendary records rather than this YouTube.
Right.
Not that they're wrong, but I think there's too much information and people are too careful. I'm making an assumption, but that's what I got out of doing those mixing courses, is just people didn't realize what wrong stuff you could do with the equipment to make different sounds.
From synths to strings to studio guitars, Complete 15 has it all. Native Instruments' flagship bundle gives you everything you need to create pro music in any genre, with cutting-edge instruments like Contact 8, Massive X, battery, guitar rig, and session guitarist for lifelike electric and acoustic guitar parts. Use our code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com or get started with Complete Start totally free. Yeah, I mean, even back to your Glenn Miller analogy, I mean, there was probably a lot of carefulness in learning how to arrange music and read music and everything, but it was the break in the rules of putting a sax where a trumpet was supposed to be that discovered the whole new sound that made everybody, made it memorable.
Like gated reverb coming from a talkback mic or whatever, you know?
Right, exactly, yeah. I mean, I have a Blackface 1176, which is a FET compressor in my studio, and I had been using it. I'd been pretty careful, actually I had a favorite thing, and I was like, that's where the sound is and everything, and I started to explore some of the other settings a little bit. And then I learned about the all button mode. It's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then I finally learned from somebody to just turn the input all the way up, just dime the input knob on that thing. And we discovered an entirely new vocal sound that some artists I work with, like, that's the sound that we love, that sound on our recordings. So it's fun to discover stuff like that. And you're absolutely right. Do you think that there's anything that we lose in the digital plugin world as far as that being able to break stuff element versus the analog world? Or do you think there's still plenty of you can break it opportunity to discover?
I think there's plenty of break it, because you can even clip Pro Tools and get sounds out of it. I remember watching a Joey Sturgis video, and he's like, oh, you have to clip your here, that's part of the drum sound. I went, wow, that's a pretty interesting way to go about it. And I started doing it, and it has a sound to it. That truncation does something. But I think because we have this sort of limitless plugin folder, that people don't master their plugins. They just sort of scroll through them till they find something that works. And so I think mastery of equipment is something that's fading in some cases, because people just will buy the bundle and they'll just go in and do the Manny Marroquin setting and leave it at that. I remember the days. It's not necessarily
even their fault, right? Because there's just not that much time in life to be able to. You can't master all of them in a lifetime.
But I think that some tools. We had a limited amount of tools, so everybody knows all these tricks with that singular tool. And I try to do the same thing with my plugins. I think I use the same, 30 plugins, maybe even less, for everything, just because I know where to go with them. And I'm not tempted by new plugins anymore. I go, oh, wow, that looks cool. And then I could spend $100, but then I've learned it just goes into the list, and I forget about it.
The island of lost plugins?
Yes. And when I reinstall Pro Tools or get a new computer, I go, why do I have this? And I'll revisit it or try to do something, but it just doesn't play into my creativity anymore. It's just too much.
Well, so I'll wax philosophical here for a moment and take that a step further, which which is to say that it's actually very empowering for all of us to accept that kind of thinking, to say it doesn't matter. It's like comping a vocal. It's like learning, oh, you can comp a vocal, and then you learn, oh, I'm so fast, I can comp 100 vocal takes into a vocal, and I've done 150, and it didn't get us anywhere. It didn't get us to a result that was the one that we were looking for. I don't think we knew what we were looking for. But it's similar with the plugin stuff. It's like you can keep looking, you can keep trying everything because you're hoping that the other one might be a little bit better, this one might be better, this one might be better. But it doesn't actually matter. What matters is learning how to use, like you said, the one that you've got. You don't necessarily want to get stuck using a terrible one for very long, but we tend to kind of hear if it's terrible too. I think we kind of don't feel good about what we're doing, or we discover it. Sometimes we discover it a little bit later, but what it does open up for us is it opens up this realization that we don't need more options outside of ourselves. We need just the right amount of options that we can work with, and that it's the possibilities of what we can come up with and the ways we can be inventive and use them where the magic is. I think, it's like, it's in us. It's like remembering to look back at ourselves for the inspiration instead of out at the gear, I guess.
I also look, especially in mastering, I've limited myself to tools that I just find allow me to use one thing and be very creative, or a tool that does something extremely well. Like there's a BrainWorks limiter, and I don't use its limiting at all. I just
use the BX limiter.
Yes, the True Peak one. I use the XL and the Foundation quite a bit, either on the pitch or the catch, just because it does something really nice, but very slight. And so it's always there just for that. I don't use anything else. Or I'll have plugins like the newfangled audio limiter. Wow, it allows you to do just about everything in one plugin. Is there another plugin that possibly does one of those processes better? Yeah, but with the limited amount of processing I do, will I really notice the effect? Or is it more important that I'm able to have a really seamless workflow and get to the result faster? I think I put more weight on that than going through a million different iterations of limiters to find the exact one. I think knowing that the ins and outs of that plugin and what it is good and what it is bad at and which cases you should utilize it and when you can push it and when you can't, that's where the sort of the secret sauce is. And I think using a single plugin day in and day out is the same thing as me using all my analog mastering gear. I just know when it's going to work. There's certain mixes that come here. Another Sheryl Crow track came in the other day, and I knew. I heard it in my car, went, oh, I'm going to use this compressor. Just on this part, oh, that's going to be great. And this EQ, because I already know what it's going to do. I can hear it. Cool. So if you don't have that relationship with your plugins, you're possibly doing yourself a disfavor because you're not applying the correct tool.
Right. As in when you have a tool set that isn't so fast you can't even learn them all, it means you do get to learn them so you know what they do, so you can know which tool to choose. Like knowing which guitar to pull down for this next song, Like you don't want to try all the guitars on it, right?
I still use the Focusrite red compressors that were the originals when the first plugins came out. And I have a theory that they've gone through so many iterations that those are possibly some of the best plugins just because they're the oldest ones and they've gotten better and better and better. I use those all the time. They're my go-to. It's like Deverb. It's horrible, but in all the right ways. And I know exactly which setting to go to and how to create something quickly. And especially when you're in a creative mode, if I'm in the studio working on something and an artist wants something, I'm not going to open the brand new waves like someone's version of a reverb because I'm I'm going to have a learning curve. I don't want that. I want immediate results. So having that familiarity with your tools, I think, is paramount, especially when you're producing or you have a lot to do in a very small amount of time, and you need to have the results that granted you your name and your success.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions that come to mind, but let me rewind a little bit because you mentioned Sylvia Massey. Now, am I correct in having read somewhere that you had spent some time working with her for a while?
Yes, I was one of her first interns when she had the theater in Weed, California.
So cool.
And then when I moved back to the United States, I had a brief stint with her as a mix engineer. We did a couple projects together. I've known Sylvia for a long, long time. I think over 20 years. I love her to death. She's an amazing creative person. She is the polar opposite of me as far as music production, and which makes me love being in a room with her because she just does stuff I would never do, and I have to think whether I'd like it or not. I don't really apply any of Sylvia's techniques, but I do apply her thought process. Because she's always trying to shake things up, not for the result of audio, but to compel the artist to do something different.
Yeah, so I mean, like Sylvia, of course, I remember when the Weed studio, when there was a Tape Up article about it, I think, and I was just fascinated by that. I love the idea of a studio in a theater because my family grew up running a movie theater, so we had a space that would have just made an amazing studio. Made an amazing movie theater too, though.
It was an amazing spot to be in. It was right at the right time in my life where I was very into heavy metal and how metal productions were being done. And I got thrown into Sylvia's production with an engineer named Rich Veltrop. Everything was analog, 2-inch, big old Pro Tools system with the 888s. And I got to see the whole thing go and how she did vocals and recorded drums. It was amazing. And it was complete opposite to everything I thought music production was. So when I left, it was just sort of, wow, we're not here just to put microphones on. And, my world was Bob Rock. She is nothing like Bob Rock. It was just doing crazy stuff to get crazy results.
At Isotope, mixing and mastering just got even smarter. Velvet gives you silky vocals with sibilant slurn de-essing, dynamic tone shaping, and de-click, all in one plugin. And Ozone 11 now includes clarity, upward compression, and AI-powered stem focus to help you master like a pro. Use code ROCK10 for 10% off Ozone or any of Isotope's incredible plugins at isotope.com. What was a vocal recording thing that you remember? And then what would be, maybe, I mean, unless it's too challenging a question to answer, a vocal recording thing you remember that she did versus something that you might do now, the way you might do a vocal now?
What I learned from her in vocal recordings just was there was never a negative thing said. She never oh, sorry, I'll do that again. Don't apologize. That was great. And she just always kept there was a great aura around that part of the day, because it was the same part of the day. No one was in the room. I sort of sat off to the side or in another room, and everything was positive.
Yeah.
I never heard her say a negative, like, we're not there yet. It was more like, yay, that was awesome. Let's make it better. And the guy would leave, and they may have only gotten a couple vocal takes, and he would be super happy. Oh, look at what we got. What we got is so amazing. And I'd walk in and go, wow, we only got the verse. Oh. But that's the way things were done. And I never did it that way. I was a lot more critical. So that the social aspect of it was something I began to think about a lot more. And she was a master at that.
It's so true. There are all these elements to production, to recording that do require, a really careful hand. There can be the technician, there can be, the white lab coat side of it. There can be the, great with people side of it. There can be the side of somebody who knows exactly how to say what note that was or what interval was just played. And it's so much fun to be around other people who are great at it, just to learn and see, pick up bits of information. How often do you get to do vocals now? And that's the other part of my question, because you're doing mixing and mastering, and you've also done recording. So one of the things that I've learned a little bit about from some of the mastering interviews is mastering, like you just described, can be a collection of knowledge about this thing does this really well, I'll try it. Or it can also be identifying very small differences between sound versus, mixing could be like turning the input knob all the way up on an 1176, or recording could.
Yeah. How would I say, like doing vocals versus mastering I don't want to say it's a different mindset, but my thought process behind it is just completely different.
Yeah.
One, mastering is that last creative step, in which you're just trying to pull out the best in the song and carry their idea in a little louder and maybe a little more enhanced to the finish line. It really depends on the person, because I have a lot of new mix engineers that work with me, and I'm doing a lot of repair. I'll phone them up and go, hey, could you bounce that again and do your fade out a little better? Or you need to go do some fades over here. That's a lot part of the mastering work, is also identifying things that could be better on the delivery. So the thought process is completely different. If I'm doing vocals, I'm looking a lot more at the lyrics and delivery and copying, in my version of what Sylvia did. Keeping things light and, happy and moving forward, but trying to do as few takes as possible. I like to do entire takes of songs rather than focusing on one phrase. I really hate overcomped tracks.
Yeah.
When I get to mix it, and it's something I learned from mixing. Like, no vocalist would actually do this, and I don't think it sounds good. But that's my opinion. But simplicity, I guess, in both of them is what I go after. Trying to do as little as possible to get the best result. But every once in a while, you have to dig in.
Do you have a way that you think you can verbalize what an comped track sounds like or feels like that might be helpful to the rock stars listening?
It's tonality. When there's so much switch in tonality between in one phrase, that's one thing I catch in a lot of lack of breathing. I find that when people comp tracks, it gets into an edit mode where they want to take a lot of stuff out. And I like the breathing between, something about the breaths between words I think are very important. And a lot of that is lost, that transitional period between words. I think a lot of the comping, if it's not done well, you lose that factor, that delivery factor. I would rather have a take that maybe is not as good tuning wise or in delivery, but at least it flows well. I think if I was to say one thing, it would be they don't flow as naturally. It sounds like it's been, chopped together instead of glued. It just doesn't stick like some of the records I like, the older records that I know, where the vocal take is basically one fell swoop and it was done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky. It's hard to learn that. It's hard to practice it. Or it takes a lot of experience, I guess. One way is to just sort of create boundaries and rules for yourself. I'm just simply not going to do something. Another is to, do it 10 different ways until you've learned what works and what doesn't work. I feel like early on I learned you can't be zoomed in and zoomed out at the same time when you're making records.
That's a great way to put it.
And thank you. And being zoomed out is sort of what you said. It's like having that ability to hear a whole take for what it is. And zoomed in is that ability to notice that certain syllables are out of tune, places like that. And, maybe zoomed in is more appropriate in pre-production too, even if it's just a band in the studio or it's studying how to perform your vocal before you just get out there and just do what feels right.
Well, so I worked on a Bruce Dickinson record called Balls to Picasso, where we sort of took the old record, remixed it, but I produced the record again. And I would go over to the producer's house and he would talk about vocal comping back in the day. And I realized something is vocal comping is so visual nowadays.
Yeah.
And before that, it was this art, and he would explain how he would do it with the faders and how he'd get the certain result and why this vocal sounded this way and this one sounded this way. And when we got delivered, a lot of the comps were still there. So I had the final vocal take, and I could see and hear where he went between vocal takes. And there was a lot more auditive concentration than visual concentration. And I think that's a mistake people do make, is visually it looks perfect, but you really have to turn the screen off or turn around and listen to it. And that producer, whose name is Shea Baby, pointed that out. He goes, he is very proud of how he used to comp vocals. I mean, the guy did the Scorpions, Ozzy Osbourne, just Whitesnake, just tons and tons of great stuff. But he explained to me his process and his perspective about vocal delivery and how he would comp vocals and guitar solos, sort of the same way. And there was a slight complaint about today how it's done, because it is so neat and visually compelling. Oh, the different colors, and you can see it was on a lot of people, I think, overcomp their vocals.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I think, I don't think I look at it. I don't think it's funny to think about that. I've got a way of doing it myself, where I'm really listening very intently, and I kind of hate having to actually look up to see what number the take was. It makes me dizzy, to be honest.
Yeah. I mark my takes.
Swooping up and down.
I mark my takes with crossfades some of the time. I'll go, that was a good one. I'll chop something and put a crossfade. And the bigger the crossfade, the better the take. And so a lot of the time when I go back and comp, I won't even listen to the other ones, because I knew that something about that one I really enjoyed. So I'm going to keep that one. Maybe I'll go back and look later if the artist says, I don't really like that take. But I think our intuition at the moment is important to remember and not necessarily second guess. There is a lot of music where I think overdoing it is great, because all of the music is overdone when it's completely electronic. There is something about it that perfect vocal, like a Dua Lipa or something like that. Everything is just so finely done that it's part of the production. But I don't do productions like that, so I get to work on a lot of stuff like that.
When you're doing a vocal comp, would you just sort of, do you like to see all the playlists on top of each other? Do you like to use the flipping through the playlist feature? What sort of thought do you have about how you do that?
I just did a reggae record a little while ago, and I would listen to the each entire take of the verse and sort of assemble it on paper, and then go back and quickly throw them through, throw them up and see if the take worked. And then I would basically work with those takes, just pushing and pulling. So I'm not going through and listening to every single, line in the verse. It was just a way to do it more quickly. And I think the band loved the result, and I did too. So I don't think I stick to a certain way of doing things. Each production is different. I have done over-comped vocals, but that was due to the fact that the vocalist was having a lot of problems delivering, and he was having stomach issues. So, that's where the technology enhances things because the delivery is something's detrimental to the delivery. So we can put out a great record and let technology, assist a little more than usual. And that there's nothing wrong with that because that's his job. And every once in a while you have to work when you're sick. And he hires people like us to make sure that no one ever knows that happened.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing, working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now again for the jam session. My guest today is Brendan Duffey, joining us from his mixing and mastering studio in Florida. And Brendan, are you ready to jam, dude?
Yes, I most definitely am.
All right, sweet. Tell us a little bit about what you're excited about right now. What are you working on? I think you have received quite a lot of great awards, and maybe you got more coming down the pike. But what are you pretty excited about right now?
I'm producing the upcoming Bruce Dickinson record. So we've done writing sessions. We've got a pre-production scheduled pretty soon. And then next year we're going into the studio to start the new record with a brand new band. It's going to be a lot of fun. So far it's been great. We wrote 18 songs already. So we're in the pipeline for selection and getting everything, all the arrangements together and lyrics. And I grew up as an Iron Maiden fan, so this is just,
wild.
I'm a kid in a candy shop. This is just absolutely amazing. And
Bruce Dickinson is also the same name of the producer from Memphis, of course, right?
Yes, and I have a great photo that I posted a while ago. It's Bruce and I in the studio, and I've got the More Cowbell t-shirt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love that. When he goes to, you're right. Of course, Bruce Dickinson puts his pants on one leg at a time, except that when he puts his pants on, he makes hit records.
Yes.
Great quote.
But I also spent the last year remixing and Atmosing his catalog, most of his catalog. So I got to work on all the records that I grew up listening to. And one of them, Balls to Picasso, is coming out as More Balls to Picasso. We recorded new, heavier guitars on top of the original guitars, put more guitar arrangements in it, kept all the original solos and parts. And we hired this guy named Antonio Tioli from Brazil to put Brazilian percussion, string arrangements, just everything you could think of, and remixed and Atmos the record. It was the record when I was a kid that I loved the record. I just never liked the sound. It just wasn't heavy enough. And so we took it and made it a big, heavy record. That was a lot of fun. And of course, working on his older records, remixing them was just so much fun to see into those old productions, especially his original one, which is Tattooed Millionaire's first solo record, was done by Chris Tankstarides, which did Judas Priest and all these other great records that I grew up on. And to see how well recorded this stuff was back then, like the room mics were for the guitars. Everything was in phase, and you pushed the mics up together and it was the sound of the record. It was awesome to see how something was done. There was a lot more art in the recording. You could tell that someone put a lot of care into the way it was captured. So when the faders got pushed up, it was like, wow, I know this record. There wasn't a lot done to it. And it just really it was disappointing because Chris died a long time ago. But all the other records, I was able to talk with the producers. So when I did Bruce Dickinson's Skunkworks, I phoned up Jack Endino, who of course did the first Nirvana record. He did Soundgarden. And I spoke with Jack a couple times working on the record together. He approved it. Great guy, awesome stories. Of course, Shea Baby, who I've been talking to quite a bit for the work on More Balls to Picasso. You know, he'll go over to his house and he'll cook me breakfast and tell me all the stories about the Scorpions and Ozzy Osbourne. And of course, the way records were done back then, which is really cool. And he's such a nice guy. So it's this like triple, the trifecta. You make a friend, you get all this good information, and you get fed, you know?
That's great, man. Did you learn anything about how Paranoia was done?
No, because that was... no, that was, I don't think that was Martin Birch, the guy who did I can't remember who did that one.
Yeah, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not super well versed in metal production, but I do remember loving the sound of that record too. It's something of like
those old records, you compare them to new records and they're much smaller, but there's something dirty and gritty about them that I really love. So it was just really cool to open these old records and also talk to the people about that time and how they were made, because the only, you know, information I was getting was from Bruce. And Bruce is such a creative person that history and creativity sort of meld together. So when he tells a story about an album, you're seeing it from his perspective over time. So it's great to compare and contrast, you know, how the producer saw it and how Bruce saw it. Because one is, well, you know, a person's been employed to take care of this record and deliver it. And the other is, you know, one of the biggest heavy metal singers on the planet and how he sees this new project and this producer. So it was really, really entertaining to put everything together. It was just wild. A really fun year with a lot of information and a lot of great records. I mean, I could not complain. I was doing that, and I did Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, Euphoria, and Meet the Grams, which, of course, swept the Grammys, which was incredible, too. That was very exciting.
And what were you doing? I know there's some things you could probably talk to us about and some things you can't, but which things are like mixing and versus mastering? Or?
I work for $1 Million Snare, which is a mastering facility located in California. Nick DePurcell, who does a lot of the major hip hop stuff, he did the mastering, and I did the Atmos for all the Kendrick stuff. Oh, so cool! It was a very small team, but I do all the Atmos for $1 Million Snare, which has been just an awesome thing to work on, because I do a lot of hip hop in Brazil. I do a lot of work in Brazil because I lived there a long time. And my assistant engineer from there turned into a very prominent producer in pop and hip hop there. So I work on a lot of his stuff. And then working with Nick, I've got into the hip hop world in the United States, which is awesome. Working with Boogie with the Hoodie, Larry June, just so many different artists. And of course, R&B like LMA, and we did Money Long. Just things that aren't necessarily in my normal wheelhouse, but I get to work with new mixing engineers and just get a whole new perspective on how things are being done in that world today. So it makes my job really interesting. And I'm thankful thankful to work with, I mean, Nick he's such a talented guy, and you see what he does, and it makes you think about stuff. It definitely makes you a better engineer. Someone like a mixer like Prizzy, who when the stems came in, I just was awe-inspired of how clean and amazing and detail-oriented his stuff was. So you get to see a lot of sort of the inside of the talent in a lot of these people, which is a privilege, but also makes you a much better engineer yourself, because you know who you're up against.
So I've actually got some questions that I'd love to ask you about, just this variety of cool sounds that you get. And I even got a question from a great engineer here in Nashville, young guy, Jack Foster, who I've been working with a lot in the studio, who's a big fan of hip hop too. And so he wanted to ask you a couple of things. You mind if I ask you a couple of questions about that?
Shoot away.
Groovy. So he said first question was, I'd like to know how he processes his low end and how he approaches rap versus R&B.
I'm going to start with the last question. The approach has everything to do with the mix and not the style, because I put R&B, rap, that big low end, along with Brazilian samba and a couple other South American genres I work with. Low end processes is there's no singular remedy to make it sound good, because of course the mixing engineers all have different approaches. I like to do the minimal amount possible. I usually find where it's moving the speaker the most, that's not in the subs, like sort of the range from 100 and up. Sometimes it'll be around 200, you never know. And maybe applying a dynamic EQ to that. But it varies so much because of different people's treatment of low end. Mm-hmm. I can't remember.
Are you
the first
discussing
question.
mixing or mastering?
Both
thought processes, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It's just because so much of hip hop is also delivered with, you don't have much to work with. A lot of time I only have a stereo track and then the vocals. So I also look at it from the perspective of the artist already likes the beat. Something compelled them to choose that. And one thing I really like about hip hop is they're not boxed in like heavy metal, where everything sort of has a limited range of how creative you can get. You have to have this badass tone, you have to have this drum. Hip hop doesn't have that. Rap and R&B there's so many things they can be sonically. So I'll alter it to give it the weight, but I do not approach it in trying to make it sound specifically like some reference. I really work on what I have and just pulling out the best that beat has if I don't have individual stems or individual tracks.
Well, let me ask you this question. So you mentioned 100 hertz and above, and I think you called it like the body or the impact or something like that, and moving the speaker. So at this point, we're talking about moving the speaker, not the sub. Sub, right?
I look at things in sustain too. You have to look at like an 808. It has a lot of sub information, but it's going to have an area where you audibly hear sort of it's almost like a plosive in the speaker. Right. And I like getting that transient and some of the time and pushing it a little, because when you have a lot of high-end elements like hi-hats and snare drums on top of that, a lot of the time the impact of the sub itself is not enough to have it seat itself in the mix or the master. A small amount of distortion some of the time is great. There's a BX plugin, Brainworks plugin, that's a limiter. I can't remember what it's called. And it's an MS limiter. And it's got 3, you can do distortion on the sub, the mid, and the sides. And some of the time just pushing that distortion on the sub will really blossom. The low end will just sort of bloom. And it gives it a certain amount of sustain because you're limiting its dynamic range. So it's also knowing what you want to do with the sub. So I can go back to that Brainworks True Peak limiter, which I don't use the limiter. There's a button on it, a knob on it called Foundation. And a lot of time when I get a sub that sounds cardboardy to me or lacks that bloom, that boom, and just sort of hits the speaker wrong, I'll EQ it to where I want it to be, and then I'll push some of the foundation up, and I find that just whatever that EQ, whatever it is, it does something to make the sub a little more prominent in the speakers and less boxy sounding. But then again, there's like 50 different ways I can do this. I just remembering these at the moment. But really, I don't have a singular approach because so much of it is so different.
Yeah. Are there, I just out of curiosity, are there any sort of all-in-one mastering plugins that come in useful to you at times? Or do you find that a lot of the plugins you turn toward are like they're doing one part of it, like limiting or EQing or something else?
Like the Isotope, the Ozone. But I never use the setup where I'm clicking through them. I'll open up the individual plugins.
Right.
Because in my brain, it's just a new device and I don't want the learning curve and I can push things around. I use a lot of the Isotope stuff because it's so well done. Newfangled Audio has the Elevate, which is just a phenomenal, but there's plenty of other plugins just like it, but I connected with that one. That can do miracles on low end. It can really screw up your high end too, because you're allowed to put all these transients in it. And if you don't remove the transient, when you're pushing a lot of transients, and you don't remove them from the high end, you can get this really brittle, almost, I would equate it, because when you have too many crossovers of frequencies, I would equate it with almost like a comb filter enhancement system. It's everything you don't want. So I will use the Elevate and punctuate for low end, even on stereo tracks, to have them just get a little more energy and movement in the speakers.
All right. Well, so let's go back and talk about the speakers a little bit. So do you ever find it that it's helpful to have a system where you can actually turn off the sub?
I do.
I have with sub on and off kind of stuff.
I will check with the sub on every once in a while, like at the end. So I have a SPL mastering console, the DMC. I have the entire mastering console set up, and I can just turn my sub on and off with the click of a button. So I will check if it sounds good on my sub, but I already know if it sounds good on my speakers, I'm good to go. And in fact, some of the time I have these little Wharfindales. There used to be my dad's speakers, and I grew up listening to them, so I know them really well. And if they're farting, I've got a problem. If I turn them at this low volume and they make the I can't stand that, I know the low end's not correct, because it should, the best sounding rap and hip hop and R&B tracks, I can turn it up in those speakers and it just sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I know if I've got that little that I'm in trouble and I need to go work on it.
You don't need to play guitar to sound like a pro. Session guitarist from Native Instruments delivers hundreds of lifelike guitar performances, both electric and acoustic, right inside Contact. Whether you're laying down rockin' electric riffs or warm acoustic beds, you'll get 154 electric guitar patterns and over 250 acoustic guitar grooves for strumming and fingerpicking, all grouped into song-ready presets. Dial in recording quality tone with built-in amps, cabinets, mic modeling, and effects. You can drag and drop MIDI into your tracks effortlessly, then tweak tempo, tuning, and feel to fit your song. And with new session packs on the way, you'll never run out of inspiration. Visit nativeinstruments.com, use the code ROCK10 for 10% off, and bring full guitar performances to your next track. No more blisters on your fingers. So you did mention the car earlier, and that was going to be one of my questions around speakers too, is how useful is the car to you as that experience, and for hip hop and low end and sub and all that kind of stuff?
You know, when we moved here, it was right after the pandemic, and cars were just filthy expensive. So I bought myself a Kia Soul, a green.
Nice.
We call it the Guac, because I live out in Jupiter Farms. It's called here. It's agricultural land. So we're out on a sand road out in a neighborhood pretty distant from the town itself. So, you know, my car's always dirty. It's always got sand in it because there's sand everywhere. And it's got this horrible stereo system. But what I love about it is I don't necessarily check mixes in it. If it sounds wonderful in that car, you're good to go.
Right.
So because the car destroys any good mix. Like,
I remember learning that from a producer when I was an intern and I was talking about cars and stuff. He was like, I always get a cheap car with a cheap stereo because that's the reference. That lets you know what the world is listening to.
yeah. But I also don't reference it. I don't mix referencing to the worst the world has to offer.
Right.
Because then the rest of your life is depressing. I've got this wonderful set of speakers in this great room, and if it sounds good in here, there's a lot of records I've mixed that I never checked it in my car because it sounds so good in here that I don't care what it sounds like in my car. And I've gone out later and go, man, this sounds okay in my car, but it sounds great everywhere else. You just can't mix for the unknown because every system is different. My wife's car has a great stereo system in it, but of course, her and the kids are always tweaking the bass and the treble. So I get in and I go, really, do I have that much sibilance in my mix? So I just sort of forget about it. Because we went on a car trip.
Kids in your mix.
Yeah. And I went, wow, whoever mixed this is super sibilant. Then on Alanis Morissette, her first album came on and I went, I have to adjust this. Because there's a lot of high end in the voice. And I went through, my kid had boosted like 15 dB of, 6K and up. And you turn it down and the stereo becomes louder and more full and less annoying. But all the mixes sounded decent, even with that horrible EQ setting.
That's funny. One of my first cars, I had a car stereo, and I was putting stereos in my car, pretty early on. Put the stereo in and then had like a graphic EQ underneath it. And I think that was like one of the first places I learned how to EQ because you just start messing with everything. You're like, oh, look what that does. Oh, and you start discovering the lows and the highs and everything. It's fun. All right. Well, so I got another question from Jack. He said, I'd also be interested in his typical vocal sends. So I think you'll just, he didn't clarify, but take that as well.
I have a template I work with, and that's it. It's not for hip hop. It's not for metal. It's for everything. And I have already set up, I have what I call my harmonic reverbs, which are reverbs that aren't really reverbs and delay. They're reverbs and delays. They're sort of strange. And it's just weird setups that I've discovered I really like and strange plugin settings. Then I have about 4 to 6 reverbs already set up. And then I've got 5 or 6 different delays. And they have multiple plugins already on them that are bypassed of things I already know I like. So delay 1 is a setting that I use quite a bit from Sound Toys. And I can't remember because I never opened them. It's this weird, it's this weird almost out of time delay that ping pongs back and forth. But I have all my delays sort of set up already. And I do a lot of layering of delays and reverbs. So I have certain ones that I only use for voice and others for guitar but it's a lot of layering. That's all I could say about it. I'll never use just one delay. Some of the time I'll use, just the Pro Tools delay and then the Sound Toys delay at the same time or slightly different, milliseconds difference with completely different EQ settings. Or one will have a small amount of flange on it. But I do a lot of layering. And then for hip hop, I will set up individual tracks with like Echo Boy on it or something for all the throws. So I can just drag the vocal track down. So I'm not automating everything. I'm automating by actual dragging down. But I treat heavy metal and hip hop the same way. For me, it's the same thing, especially death metal. Death metal and hip hop have a lot of the same vocal enhancement because some of the time the vocal is so similar the entire time that you really need a lot more dynamic movement. So delays and different reverbs really change the dynamic of the mix. So I use a lot of different ones. So I'll have my chorus, where I'm going to do my chorus for the lead vocal. A lot of time I'll just open a new track and drag and drop, and I'll have completely different settings that have similar output as far as effects go, but it's just enough to make it sound different. Maybe a little more body on the reverb, or the delay will have a longer tail on it. But again, I don't have exact settings. It's just I do what sounds good at that time, and I'm good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's cool. And I think it's a good reminder to us too that the process of creating a template like that, where we've got these sounds that we thought were cool on backup. Some are like we think might work for all kinds of music, and then some might be special effect things. It's really just about, again, trusting ourselves. Like, well, what do we like? Because that's the kind of music we're supposed to be making anyway. And then, just setting up templates of having those things available to us so that you don't have to go hunt for it. You can just enable it and try it out.
I have a lot of stuff where I have 4 different parallel compressors for vocals. One I use on the mains. It's always just there. I'll push it up in the chorus to get a little more push on the lead vocal in the chorus. But some of the others, some of the time, I'll just have it. I'll have delays and reverbs and stuff on the parallel compression, and I'll push that into the mix with backing vocals, or when there's throws, I'll use that instead of the lead vocal. It really depends, but I tend to, some of the time I'll put the effects only on the compressed part, because it just sounds grittier to me. I'll really destroy the backing vocals in the parallel with distortion and stuff on them, and that will be my effects then for those backing vocals, will be on a parallel. Because I can also dry them up, and if I have backing vocals in the verse, I don't want them as aggressive, I can just simply turn the backing vocals off and pull back my parallel process. My whole idea behind this is I want less faders, even though I have more. I tend to be mixing all the way to my right, which is all the parallel compression and all the lead vocals and the buses are over there. So as I get older and older, my busing system gets more complex, but in reality, it allows me to do a lot less processing on individual tracks, because I'm shooting through so much processing in parallel that I can just push stuff around.
Do you actually like to have physical faders when you're mixing, or do you sort of find that the mouse on the screen is plenty of it?
I just got the 16 SSL faders that are sitting right below me, and both the control modules.
Is that the UF8?
Yeah, the UF8, the UF1, and I can't remember, the UC1 or something.
UC1 with the EQs?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, because that's what I have too now, and I love using it.
It makes me use my ears a lot more, and it's making me play with the pan knob a lot more. I think it takes your eyes off the screen, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually moving when I'm mixing too.
Yeah.
Which is something different. I get to fly through all the different channels. I think it's improved my workflow, and I just enjoy mixing work. I don't know if it's changed my sound, but it definitely makes me a happier person to work on it.
One of the things I discovered is, SSL has made this beautiful product with the UF8 and the UC1, and I don't have the UF1 too, but these are basically the eight channel faders. I think the UF1 is a single fader controller module, and the UC1 is like an emulation of the SSL EQ channel strip. So you've got all the compression and everything there. Plus you have the stereo bus compression, which I've started using a lot. But because it integrates with Pro Tools has a bottleneck because of the Huey thing. That means, well, you don't get all the bells and whistles that are available in the UF8, which I wish I did, but I also don't miss them, because just simply having that fader and the mute and the solo and the pan and being able to see all the faders and put hands on them and move a bunch around at a time has been so awesome. The only thing that'll catch me off guard is when I go up and I start adjusting the UC1, the EQs, and again, like I'm like, oh crap, it was still on the other sound or the other fader.
I learned to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Or leaning
like
on and
taking an extra glance, right?
Like the leaning on some of the push buttons, and it'll push the pan into center. And I'm like, what changed in my mix? And then I go back, and so there's a small learning curve, but it also makes you go and double check stuff. But
yeah,
I still use quite a lot of analog gear, and I had looked into getting maybe a summing box with real faders, and then I thought about it, went, you know what? My workflow is working as is. I think I just need something to introduce more control as opposed to just my mouse. Right. But I'm still perfectly happy mixing on my mouse.
Yeah, and Rockstars, we have a playlist of Brendan's music in the show notes, so please click through and listen to that, and you will hear that however he's doing it, it's working. Some great sounding records in there. Here's an unusual question possibly for you, but because there's a lot of great bass music, with the hip hop tracks you're doing, you've got the variety, you're doing metal stuff, you're doing hip hop, you're doing stuff that's, got the salsa leaning or is coming from South America. There's definitely a lot of bass music, a lot of appreciation of that sub, low end, and vocals also. The hip hop community seems to really take advantage of being able to make space for a vocal where the vocal is just so close. It's like enveloping your head, you're it feels like you're inside the speakers when you're listening. And that's just in stereo. That's before we get into the Atmos stuff. But as far as the bass goes, I was sort of curious if you have found that some keys for songs actually give you better bass management or better low end and subs. And then the addendum to that is like, for example, is D, D the saddest of all keys. Which, hopefully you know my reference there.
Yes. Some of the time I'll check that because when I'm mastering, I like to figure out the key.
Yeah.
And this is something I learned from Depp from $1 Million Snare. He goes, figure out the key, because then you're going to figure out where a lot of the resonance and where the low end hits. So definitely that's a factor. But what factors in weighs in more than that is the arrangement on top, is what people are doing on top of the low end. Because of course it's sort of, you create sympathetics from what you do. It's like playing a piano. So when you have really thick arrangements, a lot of pads and stuff, I think it tends to screw up the low end a lot more, because the low end it's not moving by itself. There's a lot of old great hip hop records where the low end is just great because it has that time to breathe without a million different elements. So I think as you take the Jason Joshuas and the Prizzies, great mixing engineers for hip hop, and a bunch of others, you're going to see that they've carved this area where the low end in the arrangements, where the low end has that space, and there's a lot more emphasis on high end elements and their panorama. They really get things out of the way. I have no idea. I think there's just a lot of parallel processing for them, but American hip hop's low end is treated in such a different way than anything that I do from South America, because South America, they like a lot of, I think the term is farting low end. It just comes from their culture, from samba and all the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's, it's funny, as we make music, we're always referencing music that has been made too, whether we're intending to or not. It may just be a reference to what we've learned about what we appreciate in previous music. And so there's always a carrying over of the history in music of what, of something related to how the music was made or why it was made. And, you think about old film and, people, there was definitely a period of digital filmmaking that it was really cool to, to make it with old film or make it emulate old film, because again, we were carrying over this appreciation of what movies used to be like, and we love them. And it's the same thing in music. So like, you know, if you reference a farting bass or something, it could be related to the music that's made. It could be related to the instruments that were used in the music. It could be related to the kinds of speakers that people had to listen to music on and
or the
appreciate
mistakes,
it on.
Also the mistakes that were made. I'm friends with an excellent mix engineer that everybody knows as Noise, whose name is Cyrus, and he works with Mix by Ali, who's another legendary hip-hop guy. And I was over at the studio, and they're mixing on Dre's old console, and Cyrus was showing me how he got the mix reference there, and the bass was just amazing on it, and it was just so distorted. And he was trying to get that, so I actually came in and just distorted the shit out of the SSL and passed it and trimmed it, and he actually made it sound better. But the mistake they made in the production was what gave it that element. And it's great to see that someone's, you know, mistake with a limiter and not knowing the capacity of 24 bits was what made that sound so amazing, that truncation. And so they repeated it in the analog world, and were able to actually improve on it. And when he played the track, I went, God, I would never think of just absolutely destroying the low end like that. But when the arrangement was put on top of it, it just made for the most amazing sounding track.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music. Check out the new iZotope Velvet plugin, featuring intelligent sibilance learn de-essing that automatically detects harsh frequencies, dynamic tone shaping with lift and tame controls, and transparent declick to clean up mouth noises, pops, and clicks, all in one easy plugin for polished professional vocals. And now Ozone 11 takes your mastering game even further with the new Clarity module for adaptive spectral enhancement, upward compression in the maximizer for increased punch without losing dynamics, and stem focus to process individual elements like vocals or drums with surgical precision. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Velvet, Ozone, or any fantastic plugin at iZotope.com. I mean, it's a cool also analogy because you're probably familiar, I think we're hopefully all familiar with this idea of like the happy mistakes, but often we think about that in the context of like performing music, like on your instrument, you know, as somebody who comes from and appreciates the jazz world too, you know, the idea of a cracked note, it's like, no, you don't get rid of it. You keep it in there. That's the thing that makes it interesting, and you hear the human quality in a performance. And it's just cool to remember that same thing applies to all the technical aspects of recording and mixing, and I'm sure even mastering, and probably going into Atmos, you know, of the recording, you know, production side of the music too. Those interesting mistakes will carry through and become the identifying feature of the sound and the creation.
Well, I've also, working with Depp at $1 Million is also pushed me into something I used to do that I stopped doing, which is chasing references. I stopped doing that because I wanted to have my own mixes. I wanted to develop my own sound, and it worked quite well. But when I'm doing an Atmos track that needs to sound very similar to the mastered track, I have to listen to Depp's master and go, how did he do this? And go back, and I've learned some of his workflow and how to translate it into the environment of Atmos. But there was one particular one that I was doing, and I just could not make it sound. I could hear that possibly a transient designer was being used on it, but I just couldn't get the same thing. It would just overcook it. So I remember phoning him and going, hey, it's almost there, but I can't get this going. And he goes, no, I only used the transient designer on one side. And then he explained his process. And he only had it, I think, on the left-hand side to accentuate one particular instrument. And he was using that spiff, I think, the Oaken sound or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I just went, God, I would have never thought of doing that. So when I
Right.
brought the plugin and did that application, immediately I went, oh, wow, that changed the track so much in a minimal way, but it was so noticeable right away. It's things like that that also make me think, mastering everything's stereo, everything has little clicks on it. And Nick didn't come from that world, so he really does some stuff that, throws my brain in a loop. And now when I master, I listen to how I could enhance instruments on sides, and I have been doing processing that only will be on the left side or the right side.
Fascinating.
Because
some instruments, not everything's perfectly matched stereo left and right.
I did a reggae track a couple weeks ago, and the chorus, the hi-hat was really jamming. And they wanted a lot of volume, and it just killed the hi-hat. Beforehand, I probably would have done some transient design across the whole thing. And now I just went there and made it so I could just go and grab that hi-hat and automated it. So at that point, I isolated the hi-hat and made it tick a little more so we could have that volume and also enhance that part. So,
Wow.
you through working through reference, you have to fight to have new ideas to run after what's occurring in the reference that you're working with. And that's the biggest challenge with Atmos to me, is working with an amazing engineer or amazing engineers and trying to imitate what they did without knowing what they did.
Right. There's a lot of power in being able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And you brought it up a few times, being able to call somebody and ask. And it's probably a good reminder to us to just remember to just maybe try that sometime.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to just ask somebody for some good ideas or for some help.
I also discovered some of my favorite plugins now. I go over to my client's house and see what they're doing. Hey, what plugin is that? Oh, you use it on the stereo. Listen. Oh, that's how he gets his low end.
Right.
Like there's an SSL 9000 emulator. And if you just turn it on and get the light's not even blinking, for some reason the low end just gets this big impact. And you discover small things like that just from going over and looking into other people's sessions or workflows.
Just another reminder, I try to go and meet people for lunch all the time. It's the one part of the day that is most accommodating to socializing for me. And even if it feels disruptive of the workday, there's so much benefit from that. It's like, go and meet people, but remember to go and meet them at their studio and listen. What do you do working there? Oh, that's cool. Because I always get really inspired by hearing what other people are doing in their place. I know not everybody can do that if you don't live somewhere where there's lots of other studios. But if there are enough studios where you are, Rockstars, make time to go and visit your friends. Don't have competitors, have friends.
Well, that's I think a thing I learned, especially when I owned a studio, because I worked with another producer for 10 years and we made all our records together. Stepping back and watch what other people do and, giving them the round of applause they deserve when they do something phenomenal, is surround yourself by people that you admire, because then you're just going to get so many ideas, creative ideas. And so every week I phone one of my friends, whether it be Alberto Vaz or Stanley Suarez. Stanley did the sound for Megadeth, and Lionel Richie. He's done Meshuggah and Sepultura, and he's mixes amazing records. He mixed 2 records that I worked on for a band called De La Tierra. Just a phenomenal engineer with an entirely different approach and a very interesting technical perspective on everything. Where Alberto Vaz does sound for Sheryl Crow. He's got an entire analog rig right now. He's going with a Yamaha mixer, one of the old analog ones with all outboard gear, and it's very minimal and it sounds amazing. And I get to ask him about his thought process. And these are top-notch engineers that, if I ask a question, they'll answer. Life doesn't get better than that. You know, you fought
Yeah.
your whole existence to get to a certain spot, and now you can have the ability to, you know, to exchange information with people that are at the top of their game.
And so these are folks that are still in your Florida community that you can connect
No,
with?
Alberto lives in Nashville. Stanley lives in southern Florida, relatively close to me. But a lot of my friends, my biggest friends, still live in Brazil. A lot of my clients and mixing engineers who I'm very good friends with live all around the world. So once a week I talk to a friend of mine in Japan who does production and mixing. We're always, you know, talking about how we're doing things, and you got a Neve summing mixer, and it's just always ideas. And I just started a new masterminds group with a group of all Brazilian music producers and instrumentalists from different genres and areas to get, you know, people together to run ideas by each other, because you not only create work for each other, but you become better engineers and producers through that.
I think that's great. I think that's really smart. You had mentioned something a moment ago about the hi-hat and about addressing something specific in and I think that was in the mastering session.
Yeah.
What about, so one of the questions I wanted to ask is, because I also noticed on some of your hip hop ones, you know, the intro is really compelling, and it's really, you know, you're not missing it at all. And then the vocal comes in, and I thought I caught sometimes the vocal comes in and maybe that thing that was up front maybe steps back just a little bit, you know, makes room for the vocal and the bass and stuff like that. And I wanted to ask you, is that just a part of the process? Like, don't be afraid to readjust overall levels of sections in the song. Obviously, the limiter sort of does that on its own, and a compressor does that.
Well, in mastering, I will do a lot. My catching system where I record it, I will automate post limiter all the time. And so I'll start the song off, and you can see some of the time when the vocal comes in, the song immediately gets louder because of the vocal level. So I will do a lot of automation in the catch, so that I do have those audible dynamic changes between sections. And I always think of, I can't remember who did it, like Yes's record with Trevor Rabin, the owner of The Lonely Heart. And
right.
These keyboards that just like punch you in the face. They come out of nowhere and they're really loud, and then they go away. And it's really adds some shock value. And especially with hip hop, when you have something that's concentrated a lot of time on lyrics and less on melody, it can get repetitive. So I like shocking dynamic movement. I like a lot of that. So when you notice that something has changed, and I find a lot of stuff is just so plowed, you know, we get so much just really heavy-handed mastering and mixing that there is no room for things to jump around and shock you.
Right.
So it's something I really love doing in mixing, is having things pop out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it's been a fascinating learning curve for me to keep discovering that there's actually more loudness sometimes in dialing back the compression and limiting and just allowing the volume knob to turn up a little bit, you know? And so it's like balancing, you know, even if it's just on the SSL UC1, even it's just like, you know what, let me just back off the compression and just gain it more, as opposed to trying to push it into the compression, you know, that kind of thinking. And it sounds like for mastering, it's a similar thing. It's like, instead of trying to slam it all up to the front, don't be afraid to just turn the volume of things up, post limiting to bring it forward.
Well, also, especially, I mean, take a plugin like the Isotope Maximizer. You've got different types of limiting that you can do, and you don't necessarily hear a massive difference between them when you're scrolling through them.
Right.
But if you want your chorus, you've got a really loud verse and intro, and you want your chorus to hit differently, do 2 passes of your master, one on modern and the other on transient. And then cut and paste those together, you will notice a difference of how the master hits from those two different versions, and you've put them together. So some of the time I will do multiple passes, or simply I've got a recording gain button that is my last section going in to my A to D. I will ride that between sections. I'm not getting more volume. I'm just getting more processing. Like the feel of any limiting or compression that I'm using is going to increase or decrease. And it's the difference between, I always explain to my students that saturation is like closing a door almost closed and then in a room full of people and yelling fire. You know, the biggest people are going to get out first, and the small ones, the high end, is going to get trampled. And distortion is just like the trash compactor in Star Wars. You're not losing anything. You're going to pull out some extra liquid and things you didn't. So the idea of using these, like maybe a small amount of saturation, very small on the verse, and then take it away on the chorus. And you'll hear that high end opening, and you're increasing. The increase in dynamics also will augment your stereo field, because we all know stereo is built either by differences in amplitude or differences in amplitude in time. So if you're doing heavy limiting, you're destroying one aspect of the stereo image. So having the ability to reduce limiting in the chorus and make it louder is another option. So you can do multiple passes on things, especially when you have a lot of big low end. Volume really hurts because it's working, then it's not working. It goes doo, and he hits, and all your limiters and everything really are forced, and then it stops. So there's a lot of breathing. And then a timing of your limiters. So if I have songs that have different time BPMs, I will go through and I'll do passes. So I switch the timing on the limiters in accordance with the BPM of the song. And I found that the release does a lot better. There's a lot less artifacts that I don't want when I have the timing correct, because everything's done on the grid anyways in a lot of these songs, especially in metal when I have like big, like drilling double bass. If that section kicks in and I have slower releases on my limiter, I can hear it suffering. But if I go
the next kick, it hasn't gotten out of the way before the next kick.
Yeah, so the limiter just plows everything down. So you want to keep those dynamics there, those sort of micro dynamics. So I will automate that, but I also do a macro dynamics automation too, where I just do either in my pitch, like pushing into the digital processing, or after the digital processing, like automating after everything's said and done, because I've just got that, it's already at zero almost.
Right.
And I can just work within that area that I have, maybe start with the song 0.3 dB down and push it up. We're using small increments, but it does make a giant difference in the end if you're using all these small approaches, small processes to create audible differences in the sections. And I think
it's just, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, so many people just have one single mastering setting for the entire song. I like to think of stuff in sections. It makes your recall sheet a little more complex, but some of the time I'll adjust the EQ, or I'll put some low end back in. The small differences, like half a dB, will make a really compelling difference for the listener.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is, because these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. I think that applies everywhere too, and it's this great reminder that the set it and forget it mentality is only so useful. It's a little bit useful in some ways, but it doesn't take you all the way there. You know, it's like the more we remember that no one setting, it's like discovering Auto-Tune or Beat Detective for drums or one of these things and then thinking like, oh, wow, it's going to do the thing for me. And then you realize it doesn't ever get it all the way right. And so then you discover what it does is it gets it this far for you. You know, it takes you to the 30-yard line or whatever, if you use a football analogy, you know, and then you have to like carry the ball yourself for the rest of the way. And that's where it all comes together really nicely, you know.
I mean, that's also, we're giving ourselves more problems nowadays. I did my Berkeley final project or / dissertation on the integration of AI into a small footprint mixing and mastering facility, along with CRM software, just basically artificial intelligence. But not only that, how would it would affect human intelligence? Like, do I become a better engineer applying these tools, and what do I learn from them? Mm-hmm. And Matt Boudreau had recommended some EQs and stuff for me to begin to use, the Goldfoss, I think it's called, and a couple others my friends sent to me. And it was funny because I started using them, and I made the mistake of using one of these EQs in a mastering project for a client who has some of the most detail-oriented listening skills I've ever encountered. And he said, you know, Brendan, there's something about the EQ on the first master that you sent that you've never done again. And I discovered the damn AI EQ was different every time I did a pass. Because it's an EQ that's thinking as it goes. And I immediately wrote the company and said, is there a way to record the pass? So there needs to be a way to say, this time when I do this, I want it to do it exactly the same way the next time. It has to automate itself. And the guy in the company went, we've never thought of that. Let's think about doing that. Because I could never use that EQ again. It is incredible. I wouldn't call it intelligent, but it's just, it really solves problems on the fly. Yeah. But in the long run, it actually creates more issues because it's constantly in iteration mode.
You can't pick up where you left off.
No.
Because it never left off, because it just know where it left off. It's funny, I instinctively had the same question about that when I was using it, and I was fascinated by it, but then I think I felt like, wait, I feel like I don't really know what it's doing or if it's actually going to do the same thing.
Well, so the other issue that arose was the fact that I called it false processing. Is we have so many quote-unquote mistakes that occur breathing and swipes on the guitar, especially acoustic guitar, that the AI would see as mistakes. And so it would sort of yank out all of the mistakes that weren't mistakes, and it would miss some of the mistakes. Mm-hmm. So you had to hold its hand the entire time you were going. And I just found I spent more time holding AI's hand and making sure it did what I wanted to do. And it took more time rather than me just going and doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's a balancing act. I mean, it's true of many aspects of making music, I think. And, you know, where we use the term AI and don't, you know, I think sometimes when we talk about it, we discover like, oh, wait, I was supposed to call this machine learning, or I was supposed to call this something else.
Yes.
But it's that same idea. It's like, you know, things that do it for us. You got to be really careful how you use it. I certainly remember, again, the Beat Detective analogy, learning that you can put that on there and it'll do some stuff really fast for you, but you have to go in and inspect it with a fine-tooth comb to check every crossfade and make sure, find all the errors and, clean it up manually and all that stuff. Or auto-tune, I mean, Melodyne is an amazing tool for tuning vocals, but if I really want it to be the best and I really want to like it, I have to go through and manually adjust everything and check everything and check the doubles and all that kind of stuff. But it's part of the process, it's like, I think it's great for us to learn all these new tools and also remember what you said earlier, which is you don't have to have a massive toolkit either, You can just pick the ones that really work for what you want to do and learn them well.
But also analyzing, is the tool truly beneficial? I was in LA a couple weeks ago, and we had a phenomenal drummer playing the song. I mean, the guy would speed up in the choruses or slow down, anything you asked. We had a click track going, but he knew how to do this. It was just amazing to watch. And then the track would be done, and it would go into the next room, and this guy was editing it. And I went in there, and he was using some elastic audio, and he went, no, look at this. You can tell him how much to groove and everything. And I was just looking at it and went, well, let's try a little more. And the next day we started recording guitars, and the guitar player felt something was wrong. And he goes, it feels really stale. And the engineer who edited it was going through and trying to choose different groove patterns or how hard it would groove. And after about 15 minutes, I just turned off elastic audio, and everybody in the room went, that's the setting. And which one is that? And I said, it's the ONOFF regulator. And he goes, what do you mean?
Great.
It's the off button. I just regulated the OFF setting. And it worked. And not to devalue that the work that guy's done, he's worked on all their records, but he went, man, I guess this time we solved a problem and I didn't need to do that. Yeah, you finally hired a real drummer, which is my argument with them for, 3 albums deep. I'm like, stop working with that guy. It's horrible. He doesn't know how to play. Let's hire this new guy. And the new guy was amazing, but they still had that technology is going to take this to the next step. It's going to be even better. And it wasn't. It was actually a hindrance on the process itself.
But I'm going to add to your point, which was not to, I don't remember how you worded it, not to disrespect the work that was put into it. That applies back to ourselves, as a reflection too. I do think it's important that we learn that it's okay to work too hard on things and to discover that you didn't need to go and do that and then just let go and throw that away and go back to, the original and stuff. It's like you walking up to the edges and looking over the boundaries. Okay, that's that edge. Walk to this edge, okay, that's that one. So it's part of the process, right?
There was that. The engineer was much younger than I was. And he goes, oh, can I talk to him? And he goes, I think the band's sort of pissed because I wasted all this time. And we didn't waste any time at all. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, they would have wanted to edit it. And they needed to edit it in order to discover that they didn't need to do that work. So it was worth it because now my problem is solved because of your work. You did excellent work. You did exactly what we asked you to do. And they asked you to do. The mistake was theirs, not yours. You did an amazing job, and now they know they don't need that. And they need to learn that. That was a learning experience. So now they're not going to question us in the future because we've proven otherwise. It's that some of the time you have to spend the time to prove your point. People aren't just going to take it at face value. They might say you wasted a little time and just answer, but no time was wasted at all. We learned that we don't need to do that. And some of the time that's part of the production because he felt fairly guilty for having done that and been gung-ho about doing that. Oh, we need to do this. It'll make it that much better. And I said nothing. I've learned to, okay, I'm not going to say anything because if it's much better, I'm going to, would have put my foot in my mouth. So I just went, okay, guys, do it your way. But that's not why I hired him. remember why we hired him, the drummer. Okay. And no one remembered, and now they remember.
Well, it's a good reminder too. You always start with great drummer. Always start with a great drummer. I guess unless you're in hip hop, but then you got to get the great loop to begin with, or it's somebody who's great at programming the
somebody who's great at making beats. I mean, there's a reason there's a handful of people like the Storks and the Timbalands of the world, because they just make everything we remember. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Well, so we've been going for a good long stretch. So let me jump forward to the finish line for us. But I want to ask you before we go one question that I love to ask all our guests on the show. And this one is hypothetical, and we get to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time and find younger Brendan and say, "Listen, dude, you don't have a full beard like I do now yet, but you will one day." Or you say, "Listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice do you feel like you'd like to go back and give yourself if you could?
Not to drink my own Kool-Aid. Don't forget how important you are in other people's lives and how unimportant your career is for other people's lives. And it's not even about engineering. It's just about, you're going to be a much happier person if the people around you are happy with you. I spent a decent portion of my career when I owned the studio just as a workaholic. Mm-hmm. And it accumulated into me selling my studio and making a lot of horrendous mistakes in my life that I remember to this day and go, "Oh," that Homer Simpson feel.
Right.
And it was really just drinking my own Kool-Aid, just like really being too hyper-focused on climbing the ladder. And now I don't do that. I move to a place that I can't ruminate about my work. I walk out and there's a pool, there's a small, there's a gigantic pond with fish in it, sometimes alligators. I go pick my kids up from school, I drop them off. I cook dinner, I do the dishes, and I don't hurry back to the studio. I come back when I want to. And that's not something I did before. So, like, don't drink your own Kool-Aid, Make sure you've got to focus on everyone and everything that's around you and enjoy things, because when you get to the right place, you may be disappointed.
Yeah, well, I think it's beautiful that you discovered that and, kept your family and, found a new home for your family and found a way to do those things, because that can be a challenge for people. It's a challenge. It had been a challenge for me. And I know it's part of one of the challenges of choosing the production and engineering and music path is how to double down on that. Like, we take this so seriously focused, but also, be able to balance life and family and make it all come together.
I'd have to put in there that around the time when I sold my studio is when I discovered Matt Boudreau's podcast. And of course, via Matt Boudreau, I said, "Oh man, I love your podcast." He recommended yours because there wasn't any resource to talk about what our Lord goes through. And not all of us are the Manny Marroquins and Chris Lord-Alges of life. We can be working in the same stratosphere as them, but we're just not household names. We don't have that attention. And we're just stuck in the studio working our asses off all the time. And there was nobody to say, "Hey, make sure you don't do this." And when I got back, I finally found it, like a resource where I can listen to other people's mistakes and fuck ups and see how they dealt with them. It's the best resource alive, because your creativity is something that comes to you. But those life lessons not many people are going to talk about those. And to have a podcast like yours and Matt's has just been, it's constant, like, it's therapy. I can get in my car, my kids dropped off, I'm going to listen to a little of Liz's show or Matt's show. And there's always a gem in there about something to think about.
But the language is not always kid pure on my show, but so just don't be too far from the volume. You never know. Groovy, do you want to, anything else you want to say about life in Florida? Is it kind of sunny and warm and beautiful down there? Are you near beaches?
Yes, I'm very close to the beach. It is, it's getting really warm right now. But I married a Brazilian woman, so, cold weather isn't a choice. So we live here, and we live on over an acre property, and it's beautiful at night. I came out today and there was an armadillo in the backyard.
Nice.
We've had alligators in the pond. Have
you taken up surfing yet or anything? Are you near the waves and the beach?
Yeah, I'm pretty close. No. I think with the kids and the studio and my career, that's enough on my plate currently. We like traveling a lot.
Catch a wave.
Yeah, I don't need one more thing. I got to walk my dog Muffin, and there's a couple things that I do, and I keep it simple.
I'm going to just write that down. I got to walk my dog Muffin. That's a good line. Well, Brendan, this is so groovy, man. Thanks for joining us here today. Thanks for taking time out from, I'm sure, a very busy schedule. Will you let the Rockstars know, please, how they can find you? How can they, follow you, learn more about you, or reach out to you if they've got questions or have a project or whatever it is that you'd like people to connect you with?
Of course, social media, Instagram. It's just Brendan _ Duffy _ audio. Okay. My site, BrendanDuffyAudio.com. And my email is the same thing, BrendanDuffyAudio@gmail.com. It's quite easy. All my contact information is there. And if you type my name into Google, I'm apparently there too.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks for joining us on the show. Rockstars, thank you so much for joining us here. Please, if you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, particularly leave us a comment. If you have any questions or have any thoughts about the stuff we were saying, we would absolutely love to hear from you. And Brendan, I look forward to seeing you in person again, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite.
All right, cheers, man. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible: iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, and SAE Institute. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes at iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com. Use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. And don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in the show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. Also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way for you to help support this show. I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for watching and listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.